You're listening to the Bail in the Midwest podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Bail in the Midwest podcast, where we explore a variety of topics related to bail, pretrial release, and the criminal justice system in the Midwest. My name is Shane Rolf. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Kansas Bail Agents Association, and I've worked in this field for the past 35 years. Now, there's a saying that politics is downstream of culture, meaning that politics and laws change in response to changes in the overall culture of society. Cohabitation, premarital sex, and unwed motherhood being examples of society changing and then the laws catching up. There's also a corollary to that, which says that culture is downstream of politics, which means that the law is changed and that those changes in the law become normalized over time as a result of those legal or political changes. Abortion rights and gay marriage being a couple of examples where changes to the law predated general cultural attitudes, and the culture has been shifted on those. Both of these statements are likely true in various circumstances. Changes in the law will alter a society over time, and changes in the society will cause the laws to be altered. I think that there's a very good argument that allowing culture to influence the law is a better option than divisively forcing the change you seek by legal means long before the general culture of a society is primed for that change. But given this, the question is then, how does the culture of a society get altered? Now, one big way is to alter the messages that are broadcast to society at large. For example, send out the message in books and music and media that all cops are bad, ACAB, long enough, and people start to simply accept this as the so-called common knowledge, whether it is empirically true or not. And then politicians attempt to change the law to address what, quote, everybody knows to be true, unquote. So with that in mind, it's always important to try and get a handle on how your profession is being portrayed in popular culture, because that's how most of society will view your profession, whether that portrayal is accurate or not. So today, we're going to take a look at how bail bondsmen are portrayed in the biggest cultural influencer of them all, the movies. But first, my guest today is Dennis Berndt, a longtime bail bondsman, a member of the Kansas Bail Agents Association Board of Directors, an accountant, and an esteemed member of his local community. And for today's purposes, our resident film critic. Dennis, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Shane. Glad to be here.
I always have the guests give us a little bit of a rundown on how they became involved in bail. So to use movie vernacular, give us a little bit of your backstory.
I was brought into it by my father-in-law. He had been a longtime bail agent here in the local area of Saline County and the surrounding areas, and led a very fun and enjoyable life. And when I got married to his daughter, he needed some help. So my accounting skills got set aside, and I became a bail agent without even knowing what I was doing, to be honest with you. Jumped right in head first, and 22 years later, here we are. So our company's been in existence for about 48 years now, almost 50. And I took over when he had gotten sick, and then became the president of the Kansas Bail Agents Association, and then slowly moved over to the treasurer's position as I am now. It's been a long career that was not something that I had planned to do when I was seeking to graduate from college as an accounting major looking to go on to law school.
Yeah, I think I can certainly empathize with that. We all sit here and go, how do we end up, doing all this for our life's work? So today we're going to look at movies with a heavy focus on bail. We will start with Midnight Run, which is basically a buddy comedy told via the classic chase plot, or if you get into literary things, the hero's journey plot. Robert De Niro is Jack Walsh, a bounty hunter tasked with capturing Jonathan Mardukas, who they call the Duke, who's played by Charles Grodin. Walsh catches the Duke fairly early on in New York, and the rest of the movie is Walsh trying to get Mardukas from New York to LA in a short time, despite a host of obstacles, while in theory resolving issues with his past and growing as a person. That's your classic hero's journey sort of thing. But for our discussion today, though, we're going to focus more on one of the supporting characters, Eddie Moscone, who is portrayed by Joe Pantoliano. I'm probably butchering the name, which is why he's better known as Joey Pants. For those of us old enough to remember Tom Cruise's Risky Business, Joey Pants also played Guido the Killer Pimp in that movie. But before we get to the clips from the movie itself, I want to play an interview that Joey Pants is talking about how he got the Eddie Moscone role, and I think it has an impact on how we look at this.
When I got these jobs, it was because I wasn't exactly on the nose, in terms of the type of typecasting that people saw me in. Like when I did Midnight Run, playing the bail bondsman, that was really against type. They wanted a George Memley type of guy, big and 300-400 pounds. I was offered one of the two gangsters that is chasing after Bob De Niro. Marty Brest's an old friend from NYU days. And so Marty called me up. He says, listen, I want to offer you one of these Tweedledee parts, look it over and tell me which guy you want. I said, okay, thank you. I read it and I didn't like those parts. It was typecasting. I didn't want to play these goofy Italian mob guys anymore. And I called him back and I said, Marty, I really don't like those parts for me. He said, well, there's nothing really you can do then. And I said, well, I don't know. I like the bail bondsman. I could do that. And he said, oh, well, no. He said, I don't see that. He said, if you want that job, Joey, you're gonna have to earn it and come in. And so I read with De Niro and I got the job.
So what really struck me about that clip was his explanation that the studio wanted an actor that conveyed what the producers viewed as the typical or stereotypical bail bondsman, the big, fat, heavy-set, gruff guy, sort of like the character that was in the Treat Williams movie, Prince of the City. I know we haven't seen that, but there was a gruff, crooked bail bondsman in that one. And I think Hollywood kind of defaults back to that when they're looking at this. Since we're just doing audio and the people aren't seeing you here on the screen, I have to point out to everybody that Dennis is the least stereotypical appearing bail bondsman that I've ever met. He very much has the appearance of a white-collar professional. But Dennis, do you struggle with this kind of typecasting that's often attributed to our industry? Are people surprised to learn that you're a bail bondsman when they meet you?
Every day. In fact, I don't know of a day that doesn't go by that somebody doesn't walk into my office and go, you're not what I expected. And so I look up and I kind of tilt my head a little bit and say, is that good or bad? And they always say, oh, no, very good, because it is very much a business that you need to run as a business. And to walk into court, walk into anywhere that you're going to, you need to represent yourself as you want to be represented or as you want people to see you. And as well as judges and people in important positions. And I feel like that's a good thing. That's the way I was brought up. You need to look your best and portray a type of industry that is a business, and we're here to help people. And probably in most cases, that's what's drawn me into it more than anything is the helping of people. But it is very interesting when I walk in that whether I walk into a jail to help someone or they come into my office, the first thing they say is, you're not what I expect.
So in theory, in Midnight Run, Joey Pants is theoretically cast against type. So let's see how that's actually handled in the movie. Is he really cast against type?
Scones, bail bonds. No, it's cash only. No checks, no cards. I'm sorry, ma'am, that's the policy. I wish I could help you out. Sorry.
Just dropped off Boucher. Is that he in?
So you finally caught someone, Jack.
Jerry, is he in?
I think that's terrific.
Jack, trying to reach you since last night. What do you got for me?
You were trying to reach me?
Yeah.
It's Boucher.
Ooh, Boucher, good score, Jack. 900, right?
No, it's 1,200.
No, 9.
That's 1,200. Come on.
No. Yeah, you're right. Stomach's killing me. I'm going over to Chinloo's for breakfast. I want to talk to you.
About what?
I'll talk to you over there.
Can I have my money first?
Of course. What do you think? I'm going to try to stiff you?
You? Never. You would never try and stiff me.
Do I detect some kind of sarcasm here?
Never.
Where
Never.
Where have I inherited this reputation? I have never done business with anybody, and Jerry is my witness, that I have ever. Does that phone ever ring? Has that phone ever rang with a complaint about me? Never. So let's go. I'll buy you some breakfast.
I don't need breakfast.
Well, then have an early lunch. Let's go.
Just a couple of visuals in this clip. Eddie is absolutely not a fashion plate. He looks like a 1970s used car salesman. So I don't know that the movie has strayed too far from the bail bondsman stereotype, except that he's thin. So Dennis, just listening to that, do you recognize a reflection of any bail bondsman that you've known over the years in Eddie there?
Just the ones on the movie. Yes, it's you're exactly right in the stereotype. It's this kind of a, I don't know, guy with chains on and maybe a bracelet that's pretty flashy. I'm trying to remember. I'm actually trying to picture him in my mind too, as it's been a while since I've seen that particular movie. But procedures that he's doing, he's almost in reverse of what individuals that walk into our office are trying to work out a deal with us to help them, where now he's in reverse trying to get a good deal out of the bounty hunter that he has hired to collect on a bounty, that on a absconder, and he's trying to get obviously a less out of pocket cost on his side. That sounds a little foul played, so to speak, but he's still running a business and he has to do his job to save his business as much as he can. But he's a little quick, fast talking, I guess. And the used car salesman that you used earlier on is almost exactly what I hear. The used car salesman is trying to make his deal while you're trying to make yours.
Well, and this was one of the things that kind of struck me about this clip that's kind of weird is that, it's often been said that flawed characters are the most interesting, and whether or not they can overcome that flaw is central to their character arc in any story. So, and as you just talked about, in the next clip we're going to hear, Eddie's going to try and get Jack to go pick up a critical bond jumper. And yet, when we first see Eddie, the first thing he's still trying to do is shortchange Jack on the bounty that he just picked up. And it's like, is this how you would handle your best bounty hunter on the most important skip you'd ever had? Or are you going to want to make them feel good about what they just did? Hey, come get this other guy for me.
There's also kind of something that struck me. This is different than what you were just talking about, but the advertising that he was doing early on, cash, no checks, no cards. It kind of struck me funny, and I realized I'm kind of jumping to a different spot though. But today, in our world, business has changed. Cards are kind of the norm now. Other forms of taking the premium for the bond that you're writing has changed somewhat. But I find it humorous that at that time that this movie was made, cash was the only item that was discussed. And I don't know, for me personally, I found it humorous because over the days and times that have changed, yes, the monetary value of cash is still there because we are dealing with individuals that have something that have happened to them. So we want to make sure that those funds are accurate and correct. And sometimes checks don't clear, but the credit card processing and things of that nature has changed our industry, so to speak. So anyway, didn't mean to jump on a different side of it, but it was just funny how that caught my ear early in the little clip.
Now, in this same clip, I think it's important to note he's also drinking Maalox straight from the bottle. He's complaining that his stomach's killing him. He's obviously under a lot of stress, probably related to this bond. But how accurate would you say this is in the bail bond business? Maybe not just chugging Maalox, but just the stress management. It can be a stressful business. I mean, how do you deal with all that?
I mean, it's very stressful. I mean, every day that you see what the mail is going to bring in, or now with email, what the court sends you, and each day you look at one of a forfeiture. We'll call it what I call it, the bond forfeiture, that somebody has failed to appear. And yeah, there's days when I don't want to look at my mail, or I don't want to look at my emails just because it started out pretty good. I don't want to ruin it yet. And or days when my family is planning on taking a vacation, and all of a sudden I do get a motion that has a rather large forfeiture on it, that we're getting short on time and vacations are not part of my future right now. So it's very stressful. And that's kind of why my hairline, I think, is receding quite like it is, because the stress does get to you, but you still got to start each day with a smile.
Oh, that's a good approach to it. All right, so let's start the next clip, the continuation of this, because this next clip is basically the setup for the rest of the movie. And this is Eddie talking to Jack about, I need you to go pick this person up.
You ever hear of a guy named Jonathan Mondukas?
Duke, yeah, I know who he is.
What do you know?
He's that accountant that embezzled a couple of million from some Vegas wise guy and he gave it to charity.
That's very good. Only thing is that it wasn't a couple of million. It was $15 million. It wasn't some Vegas wise guy. It was Jimmy Serrano.
I know. I can read the pages.
I don't want to bring up the past, but isn't Serrano the guy that ran you out of Chicago when he was running things back then?
He didn't run me out.
Yeah, right. You give up being a cop to do this shit.
All right, what's the point?
The point, Jack, I bailed out the accountant. See, I didn't know who he was at the time. I mean, had I known, there was no way I would have put up the bond. I mean, it's only a matter of time before Serrano vanishes this guy from the planet, and I'm out $450,000.
You're out $450,000 on this guy?
No, because I got you, and you're the best, and you're gonna find him and bring him back.
Yeah, right. How do you even know this guy is still alive?
Because this guy is crazy. He sends postcards to Serrano. He's telling him what a great time he's having with his money.
How much time you got left?
Friday midnight, I default. I eat the $450.
This Friday? That's 5 days. Forget it. You go find him. Give
Jack,
me my money.
All right, look, listen, I'll give you 50 grand.
50 grand? I gotta chase you down for 1,200. Forget about it.
No, Jack, please.
Jack, nothing. Forget about it. What else you got?
God, I got nothing. This is it. If you don't find this guy, I'm out of business.
Eddie, I'll do it for 100,000.
100,000? Are you out of your mind? This is an easy gig. It's a midnight run, for Christ's sake.
Maybe I haven't noticed, but I'm tired of getting shot at. I'm tired of this miserable fucking business, every lowlife that I run into. If you're gonna pay me, you gotta pay me what's right. You want me for this job? Give me what's right.
First of all, the guy is an accountant. He's not going to shoot you. All you have to do is find him. You put him in a bag, hit him with a rubber hose, bring him home.
Oh, man, it's easy for you to say. Listen to me. It's 100,000, no more, no less, and I want a contract.
Contract?
That's right. I want it in writing. $100,000, and I'll have the Duke here for you by Friday night. Now, can I have my 1,200, please?
You do worse than any crook I ever put a bond up for.
From a storytelling perspective, the movie is using Eddie to give us a Jack Walsh's initial backstory. Walsh is a former cop who was run out of Chicago by a mafia chieftain. So we know that there's more to this Walsh character for us to discover going down the road. But from the bail bond perspective, there are a number of issues to unpack here. It's a fairly short clip, but there's a lot of stuff going on here. First thing I see is like evaluation of risk. Eddie says he would have never done the bond if he had known who Mardukas was, because the mob would vanish the Duke. And as a side note, if we can't produce a body or death certificate, we're likely to have to pay the bond. So if they put this guy in concrete overshoes and throw him over in the river, then we're stuck. So when you're deciding whether or not to post a bond, I assume that the mafia vanishing the guy is not a typical risk factor that we have to consider, but there are other ways to vanish. So what are some of the other factors you take into account in these high profile types of cases?
How far he is away. This was in California and he's in New York. Where is his home residence? Where is he going? Does he still have his passports? Does he have anything that takes him out of this country, as we cannot bring him back from certain countries? This is a high profile case, but what they discuss in the movie is things that I think about, whether it's a deal with the mob or maybe an individual that's running drugs from Mexico. What's that situation? Where they might be or not be when you need them. So I guess in my process, if he actually embezzled the amount that he did, I would hope that maybe Moscone had collateral to back that bond.
Exactly.
It's a very small portion of what the alleged total embezzlement was, in my opinion, but still, it's a large bond.
And so I was thinking, just what you said, the collateral, where the heck is the cosigner and the indemnitor on the bond? We don't see that in the movie at all. One would assume that he didn't just take the Duke's money with no additional security. Collateral, some sort of security is an issue with bonds that are a lot smaller than $450,000.
And we're looking at people to indemnify a bond at a $500 amount. I mean, it's from the very smallest to the very largest. You're kind of doing a process that's, in my opinion, almost similar. And some people might look at it like, well, it's only a $500 bond. I have to chase those sometimes just as often as I have to chase one that is extremely large. The amount sometimes doesn't matter. It's just what's going on in that person's life at the time. So, yeah, the indemnitor, which in layman's terms, a lot of times people use as cosigner, but there is a difference in the terms. But that's the first thing that we're usually talking about, no matter what the bond is. And can that indemnitor actually back that bond? Do they have the ability to satisfy that forfeiture if it comes to that when we can't find them in 5 days, as the movie portrays?
And the 5 days, that's it. If only 5 days left to find a $500,000 bond, I mean, this seems pretty unusual. California, as you know, or maybe you don't know, but California generally has a 6-month return window. If you get them back in within the 6 months, you're good. And the statement that's made in this clip that Mardukas has been sending postcards to Jimmy Serrano, because this is a pre-email era here, seems to imply that quite a bit of time has passed on this. So even in some place locally like Kansas here, where we have a minimum of 60 days to get somebody back in, would you be waiting until you had 5 days left on a $500,000 bond before you started to take some action, try and get him back?
I think I'd have been working on this one the very first day. So, yeah, and the fact that allegedly the Jack Walsh, the best in the business, was just notified also, like you just related on, is the 5 days left. And I agree, that's what makes the movie. It's why it's called The Midnight Run, but trying to get him there and back within a short amount of time. But it is strange to me that he's waited 5 days, and I can also understand why he's drinking straight from the bottle of Atlanta or whatever that may be to settle his stomach, because that would be very nerve-wracking.
Now, finally, and this is a visual, Eddie finally pays Jack for the bond that he just picked up. but he pays him by pulling up his pant leg and pulling a wad of bills out of his sock. And I assume that as an accountant, that's how you carry your cash around and track your business, the sock ledger, as it were.
Of course, I think he's just writing a receipt on his leg.
All right. So ultimately, Walsh takes the job and immediately and almost magically finds and catches the Duke. They have some sort of electronic mumbo jumbo that supposedly he does to track down where the phone call goes. And so then he calls Eddie from the airport to let him know that he got the Duke. And that's our next clip here.
Moscone's Bail Bonds. Jerry, put Eddie on the phone.
Jack, what's the progress?
I got him.
You got who?
The Duke. He's standing right here.
You got him. Already?
Sure do. Want to say hello?
Say hello to your bail bondsman, Eddie Moscone. Hello. There you go. Jonathan Mardukas in the flesh.
Jack, I love you. What happened? How did this happen? Where'd you find him?
I found him in New York. We're at the airport.
Holy Christ, this is wonderful. This is wonderful news.
I'll be in your office by midnight tonight, and I'm telling you right now, Eddie, I don't want to hear any bullshit. I want the money tonight.
So go into one of your Swiss bank accounts.
No, Jack, you don't have to worry about nothing. It's the best money I ever spent.
Okay, I'll see you in a few hours.
All right, I'll see you later. Night.
So what's that all about?
Jerry, Walsh got the Duke.
Walsh got the Duke.
He got him. He got the Duke.
No kidding. This calls for a celebration. I'll get some donuts.
So, Dennis, can you identify with the emotion in this clip? I mean, this is an emotional response from Eddie.
Yes, it's odd or crazy, I guess you could say, that his emotions I felt before. I've been on the phone myself with individuals that I have hired to locate and pick up an individual that has eluded me, so to speak, and I needed some extra additional help, and they've called me and says, this individual's in custody or already at the law enforcement facility. And I mean, there is just like this sense of relief until you open up your office the next day and have another one you got to work on. But still, this one's gone. It's done, and you're like, wow. But oh no, I can. I've turned to my wife many times, and she looks at me and says, "Everything good?" And I go, "Oh yes," and explain to her the situation. But yeah, that was probably the most realistic piece of this entire movie of a bondsman after and or during a forfeiture that has been eluding them for some time.
I remember the situation. We had somebody that jumped on us on a $100,000 bond. And of course, that's life altering. And, so then we did finally catch him. And it's just this, this fist pumping moment that, got the guy back. All right. I don't lose $100,000. But I think this is the genius of casting Joey Pants to play Eddie in this role. Had the producers gone with the big gruff version that they were initially aiming for, I don't think that character, that character type would have been able to give us that same emotional response that Joey was able to do.
I agree with you totally. I think the big gruff guy would have been, why aren't you out looking for him instead of Jack Walsh, who was actually kind of a small guy. And Eddie kind of plays, or the actor plays Eddie very well as, I'm not that aggressor. I'm not the aggressor that's going to go out and look. I need someone else to assist me on that. And I think that for this particular situation in this particular movie, it worked very well. And I thought he played it pretty well. It's a short role. He doesn't really show up a lot except either on the phone or at the beginning, but he does a good job, and especially a great job when his response on the phone to Jack's telling him he's got the guy, he's in custody, he's with me, he's right beside me, is perfect. Spot on.
So, and this would have been a short movie, except that Walsh then jinxes the whole thing because he's busy counting his money before he's actually finished the job.
Yes.
And he's telling Eddie to have the $50,000 at his office at midnight. It's like you're going to exchange, $50,000 at midnight at the office. It's the classic, counting unhatched chickens argument.
I don't know if I remember the next clip of that movie. Just, I don't know why I remember it, but it does stick out in my mind that what you're saying about counting his money, when they get on the airplane, they're in first class and he is wanting champagne, if I remember correctly. And I don't know why this sticks in my mind also, but I feel like there was a like a bunch of flowers right in front of the seats that they were sitting in. And it's like down at the bottom of the screen. And I don't know why I remember this, but it caught me funny also because I don't ever remember any plane that I've ever been on that there was roses or something in any row of the plane, let alone the first row of the first class. But I found that funny because he's riding in first class with his bounty beside him ordering champagne. So
and steak and lobster, and he's like, woohoo, this is all right. I've had that happen before. You sit there and you're working on a large bond, you're like, oh hey, and this much money, go get it. And invariably, if you start thinking about it in that terms, something goes wrong. It's just life slapping you down for your hubris of counting the money before you've actually finished your job. And of course in the movie things go wrong. Mardukas throws a fit on the plane and they get kicked off the plane, because he fakes that he can't fly. And then we fall into this planes, trains, and automobiles scenario of trying to get across the country in the best way that they can. But Jack doesn't call Eddie to let him know the problems with the plane. There's no communication. I mean, we are a pre-cell phone age here during this movie, but you still call. I got a problem. This is the problem. How do we work this out? But no, we couldn't possibly do that. And so the next time we see Eddie on here is after the plane has landed and there's no Mardukas, there's no Walsh, they're just in the wind. What happened? So we'll hear what his response there is, because this is sort of telling as well.
Jerry, how the hell could he miss the goddamn plane? He called from the airport. All right, it's time to bring in Marvin, all right? Call him up, he's in Pittsburgh.
Marvin Dorfler?
Yeah, Dorfler. Under D in the Rolodex for jerk, Jerry.
Could I at least have some French fries?
I said no, Pecker Breath. Now shut up. Yeah, Dorfler.
Marvin? Sweetheart, am I glad I got you? Boy, do I have a job for you.
Yeah, I'm listening.
First of all, I got to apologize because we were trying to find you, and it's a very important job, and I couldn't find you, so I had to give it to Walsh, but now he's fucking it up, so...
I don't know why you keep hiring that fucking guy.
I know, I apologize. You are the best at what you do. You know that? Now listen, do you know who Jonathan Mardukas is?
No.
Jonathan Mardukas, the Duke.
Eddie, I never heard of him.
All right, listen, that's not important. What's important is that you find him and you bring him back, okay? Now, last I heard, he had him in New York, and now I don't know where the hell they are. But if you find him, I'll give you what I'm giving Walsh.
Yeah? What's that?
$25,000. But you gotta have him back by Friday midnight, otherwise the deal is off.
Yeah, well, don't worry, Eddie. For 25 grand, I'll bring him in on a silver platter.
Bring him any way you want, but bring him, okay?
Bye.
All right. From a story perspective, really all this does is just basically create another obstacle. When you're building stories and telling stories, you want to create obstacles for your main character. So now Eddie has created another obstacle for Jack to have to overcome. There's another bounty hunter involved who's trying to take the person away. But from a real life perspective, how common is it to bring in a second bounty hunter, in the midst of an active retrieval?
I don't know if I ever have done that. Not when it's already being done. I found that very humorous also that he was being a car salesman again as he was hiring and calling this second bounty hunter and undercutting the value of the first bounty hunter by several $1,000s. Found that very funny, but I don't know if I maybe have called him while I'm on the pursuit, but never after the pursuit or after I've already gotten the phone call from my individuals that have helped recover the defendant. And by all counts, I pretty much called it good at that moment in time. I don't think I have ever come across one that has either gotten away at that moment and or, like this situation, lost them altogether. But we are also in a different age. Like you had said at the beginning of that clip, we do have cell phones. Right. We do have texts. I remember quite vividly when I first met my father-in-law that he did have a beeper. He did have a pager. And, there's another movie, The Hangover, where the gentleman says, "Where's your bank of phones?" Well, you needed to know where those bank of phones were at all times so you could always make that phone call somewhere. So I think that is the difference in this particular time frame that this is being portrayed by, that I find also kind of interesting, because one of the first things that my father-in-law taught me, or said to me, I should say, when I first started this business, because cell phones were still kind of a nuance. It was kind of a big deal. You had a cell phone. That's pretty slick. And they weren't near as usable, I guess, for multiple tasks as they are now. You had a phone. That
Right.
was
It
it.
was just a phone.
And our term was no phone, no loan. And what that meant was if you didn't have a home phone, you were not to be, that was the first thing you asked when you were interviewing that individual for a bond, because that said stability. Stability was big in the bonding industry because if you had a home and you had a home phone, you had to set that up. And so you had a history that followed that phone. So that was the first thing that my father-in-law always said to me, no phone, no loan. That terminology has had to change quite significantly over these years. And during the course of this movie, it kind of shows, kind of funny that, wherever he called him, he was at a payphone. Whenever they got a hold of each other, it was at a payphone or at a restaurant with the maitre d's phone. So again, I find it very interesting because I don't know how I would function without a phone beside me right now to make phone calls, to find people. It's just crazy how these times have changed. So.
Well, I remember when I first started doing this, and it's been a while. Only one bondsman in my area had the great big old Motorola brick phone. I mean, paid
Yes.
$3,000 for it or whatever it was back in the day, and a couple $300 a month at least in the fees. So, and I had a beeper. I had an answering service and a beeper, and so I get a beep beep beep, and as I'm getting my beep, the guy's sitting there in the courthouse next to me and answers a phone call and he's talking to somebody. And so I get the name and I go around the corner of the payphone, call my answering service, and they're calling me because I've got a call about the guy that already called the other bondsman. And it's like, so I've already lost that bond. And so then you go out and, okay, well, fine, I'll get a phone. And I end up with some Radio Shack thing that was, 1.5 feet tall with an extra long antenna that I would break the antenna every other week on. But it cost like, $1,800 30 plus years ago for that.
It wasn't about now that your data minutes, that was all about voice minutes.
Right.
It was, you were paying by the minute talking, not internet, not texting. It wasn't texting at that time. I don't remember.
No, not at all.
But yeah, it was quite the big deal when all of a sudden you could get the StarTAC Motorola flip phone that seemed to be the big deal at the time. And that was a huge, huge increase in just comfort without this monster that you're carrying around. It was pretty cool to have that first flip phone. But yeah, you're right. It was an expensive venture to go to the cell phone store and get your first cell phone.
And now it's ubiquitous. Everybody's got it. They're giving them. I mean, you can buy them at Walmart for $20.
And now you can't even look at a phone call coming in and really know where that person's calling from, because your area code, that, if you will, for your location of the United States or within the state of Kansas or wherever, doesn't define where you're from anymore, because the phone carries with you. You can be you might have a number from New York City, but I've lived in Kansas for 16 years or something of that nature, because that number does not represent locale anymore.
Right, and it can travel with you.
Yeah.
But before we start sounding like old men complaining about how things were when we were younger, go back to the movie here, and like I said, what strikes me most about this is the utter lack of communication here. Walsh is not talking to Moscone. Moscone is not being honest with Walsh about what's going on, and I think this is sort of a Walsh character flaw that's coming to the fore here. I have to believe that as a bail bondsman, we would be willing to move heaven and earth to fix these sorts of problems for a bond this size. I mean, charter a plane myself, pay for tickets on whatever, et cetera, et cetera. And so as we're sitting here armchair quarterbacking this movie, what are some of the alternative solutions you can think of here, rather than just letting your bounty hunter twist in the wind over this, if your bounty hunter would even call you and tell you?
What you just said, I'd meet him somewhere. I'll meet you halfway if you're having problems. I'll do whatever. But I still feel like it drops back to that connection just by means of contact on the phone or whatever. There is a huge time lapse that I don't know how I would have dealt with it back then, to be honest with you. But I think I would have had a good point that you just said. I would have had a limousine parked there for that person to be put inside. I will escort you back to wherever that ending point would have been, whether it would have been New York to California or somewhere in between. I think I'd have been there too.
So we'll move on to another clip so we can stop talking ourselves here. So finally, Jack calls Eddie back, and Eddie is like, "Send me some money. I'm trapped. There's a problem here. So here's we're gonna ask a request to wire some money."
Hello, I'd like to make a collect call to an Eddie Moscone from a Jack Walsh.
Moscone, Bail Bonds.
Jerry, Jack, put Eddie on the phone.
Eddie, it's Jack.
Jack, stop fucking around. Where are you?
Where am I? I'm in Boise, Idaho. No, wait a minute. I'm in Anchorage, Alaska.
No, wait. I'm in Casper, Wyoming. I'm in the lobby of a Howard Johnson's, and I'm wearing a pink carnation.
What the fuck are you talking about?
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the other guys.
What other guys?
Well, let me describe the scene to you. There's these guys, see? They've probably been up for like 2 days.
They stink of BO, they have coffee breath, they're constipated from sitting on their asses for so long.
They're sitting in a van, and they're probably parked right up the street from your office.
But now, you guys, you're gonna have to pack up all your shit and go home because I'm on to you, you dumb fucks. Eddie, your phone is tapped. Listen, I'm not gonna use this line anymore. Go to Chen Lu's.
I'll call you there in 5 minutes. They can't run a tap that fast. So long, everybody.
Excuse me. Oh, yeah, I got it. I think it's me. Jack, that you?
Listen, I need you to wire me $500 to the Western Union office in Amarillo, Texas, right away.
Wait a minute. What do you need with $500 on a bus? And why the fuck aren't you on a plane?
Did it ever occur to you that I am a professional and that I might have my reasons? We are driving now, and I only have enough cash to get to Amarillo. We had to scrap the bus.
Fuck the bus. I want to know what happened to the goddamn plane.
He doesn't like to fly.
He doesn't like to fly? What the fuck does that mean? Listen to me, Jack. You gotta be back here in less than 2.5 fucking days. $500,000 of my money. What the fuck is going on there?
Eddie, I swear to God, don't start with me now or I will shoot him and I will dump him in a fucking swamp. I am in no fucking mood for this.
Just send me the money and I'll have them back by the deadline. You hear me?
Yes. Terry, wire $500 to Jack Welch in Amarillo, Texas right away. Amarillo, Texas. Now listen also. Get Dorfler down there. Find him and get him down there too.
You got it, Eddie.
So obviously he's losing it over the fact that, we're now, devolving as far as how we're getting across the country. If there's some criticism of this, basically he calls in Marvin, and as it turns out, the other person working in the office is taking money from the mafia to kind of get them updated on what their progress. And so apparently they send the money to Amarillo. And so then both Marvin and the mob are waiting. That, I guess from movie terms, there's only one Western Union office in the entire city of Amarillo where people could possibly be picking up money. So that sort of ridiculousness aside, they all show up and things fall apart even worse. And so the movie falls into slower and slower modes of transportation. And I half expected them to end up on a donkey in the middle of the desert trying to bring me into California. Walsh loses the Duke to Marvin, who then tries to sell Mardukas to the mafia. And so ultimately by using his wits and quote unquote feeling like a cop again, Walsh turns the tables on Serrano, gets him arrested. And for some reason, the FBI allows Walsh to take the Duke back to LA for the bounty. And so when he arrives at the airport, he calls Eddie. And he's back at the airport. He's given Eddie a call, and he knows that Eddie has sent Marvin on him. He knows that, he feels like Eddie's betrayed him. We'll listen to that last conversation. It's the last part of Eddie Moscone being in the movie here.
Yeah, Moscone Bail Bonds.
Hello, Eddie.
Yeah?
Where's Jerry?
Never mind, Jerry. Where the hell are you, Jack?
Feds picked him up 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, what for?
What's the difference, man? I never trusted that guy anyway. Well, where the hell are you?
Where am I? I'm at the airport.
And guess who I'm with? I'm with the Duke.
You got him! Oh, you got him, Jack! I love you!
Yeah, you want to say hello?
Yeah, put him on.
Yeah, say hello.
Hello.
Hello, you son of a bitch! We got you, you son of a bitch!
Yeah. Now say goodbye, you lying little piece of shit, because I'm letting them go.
Jack?
So again, we're back to the original, you got him! That whole emotional high from him, and then, just pulls the rug out from underneath him. This is supposed to be the completion of the character arc for Jack. Redemption for the wrongs that occurred to him early in Chicago. He can now get out of this quote unquote miserable bail bond bounty business. And that's the movie there. But I have a hard time really seeing Jack as the good guy here. I mean, he does completely screw Eddie Moscone. I mean, who has presumably been his source of livelihood for the last 9 years since he got run out of Chicago. I mean, granted, Eddie's been sleazy and he hasn't been straight up with him, but is the penalty for that really commensurate with the crime, to leave him hanging and put him out of business for that?
You're exactly right. And part of before you led into that last segment, and I found it very odd that when we have a bond or when we have a forfeiture, and even in this case, a very large one, and a very big case, it would seem, that some type of warrant or some type of information would not have been out there, that when the FBI or some higher power in law enforcement, I would call them, has a hold of someone, that they would let him go versus just taking them into custody and sending them back to that state themselves. I just, again, that usually makes you as a bondsman feel even better. It's like, oh, good, they're in custody and they're going to be extradited, as today's terms are utilized, and they will be back here. It might not be in 5 minutes, it might not be in 2 days, but at least they're in custody. And in some instances, can't say that back then that this might be the case, but that might have actually taken care of the problem at hand, which is the $450,000 that was due in 2 days. So I didn't mean to jump into a different area, but I found that really strange, because usually law enforcement, and I would think that FBI has some legal powers that most people don't, that they would have held on to him instead of, here's your guy.
Well, and in my experience with dealing with the FBI, yeah, they might have told him, sure, we'll let you turn it over to him. But in the end, they're going to keep Mardukas in custody because they want him to testify against Serrano. They're not going to just let him walk over on this ridiculous, fake discs thing where they're going to keep him in custody. They need Mardukas for that.
Exactly. And that's hit a square on the head there. I found that was one of the most oddities of the entire show, that here's your guy, even though he's part of our case, a big part of our case. So,
absolutely. Now, again, back on the Jack being the good guy or the bad guy, I mean, he does. I mean, it's the movie, so we forgive a lot of this stuff. So much of the stuff that occurs in movies that we see is cool or interesting, whatever it is absolutely a crime. I mean, you hit somebody in the face, and they may have deserved it in the movie terms, but that's an aggravated battery, and so you're going to be charged with that. So Jack commits an enormous number of crimes throughout the movie. I mean, stealing cars, stealing money, impersonating police officers. And I've seen
using his picks to break into the house. I think that was shown 2 or 3 times, that he was using this little thing, gadget, kind of slick little gadget thing that he could spin and open up a door with. And I think they always reverted back to the fact that he had been a police officer and it was okay. It's not even okay for a police officer. That he was the good cop back then, but got booted out by the bad cops. And here at the end of the show, and honestly, kind of during the entire proceedings, there was, like you said, there was a lot of situations that probably weren't portrayed correctly, or that he should have portrayed correctly as the good guy.
It's a fun movie, but from an accuracy angle, as far as the bounty hunting, it's all schlock. I mean, none of this was going to occur. I mean, there's all kinds of gunfire. You're in the news. The FBI it's like there's just no way that any of this stuff's going to occur. When you're not just going to go, here's your guy. I'll go fight it out with Eddie, whether he's going to give me my full amount of money or whatever. But no, I'm going to take this guy, and then I'm going to commit a whole host of additional crimes to try and get him back, because somehow it's all going to be forgiven if I commit all these crimes, but I turn this guy in.
As a bonding agent and or bonding company, we do have to go out on our bounty hunts, I guess you could call them, on our own. And during that process, my first statement is, make sure you're legal by the law. We can't go kick in doors like he's picking a lock to go in a house. I don't know if there's even a way to tap a phone like he tapped the phone to listen, if that's legal, I should say. So everything that an individual in this industry has to do, we still have to follow the law. And it doesn't portray that quite that way in the movies, as you stated earlier. The movies are a little vented a different direction to make them fun. But yeah, our whole process has to be by the law. There's no kicking in doors just for fun.
Right. I mean, we are bound by that. I've seen lots of bounty hunters charged with, with every single one, not every single one of these, but certainly the impersonating police officer aspect. I've seen bounty hunters charged for just calling themselves, fugitive apprehension agent or something along those lines that gives the implication that you're in law enforcement. So you have to be really careful about that, because they will charge you for that.
Or even just showing a badge that says fugitive recovery agent, but it looks like a police officer badge. It's as simple as that.
Let's kind of roll us back to our original premise from a culture perspective. I don't know that this necessarily places us in the best light from a cultural perspective. It does create, it expands on this stereotype of the bail bondsman, even though I think that Joey Pants did a great job of breathing life into what was intended to be just a stock character. The implication is that the bail bondsman is not really one of the good guys. I mean, Jack's character arc is one of redemption, but that redemption is getting him away from Joey and the bail bond business. And the bondsman is not one of the good guys, and he deserves to lose his business for having the willingness to involve a second bounty hunter when the first one's not being exactly forthright about the status of this extra large bond forfeiture. So, I mean, what are your thoughts as far as how this? I mean, it's an iconic movie, and I don't think people think about it, quite, and are not really drilling down as much as we are into it. But what's the overall implication that this leaves people think of bondsman? I mean, kind of gets back to you're not what I expected. I expected this guy from the movies.
Right. I love your earlier terminology, and I hate to put this on the car salesman either, but the idea, of this guy with a plaid jacket comes out and he's whatever, but it does kind of give you that, here's this used car salesman guy, and I want to, make the best deal I can because I'm going to, pardon my French here, but screw that guy out of this deal. And that's the light I see on the way they portrayed the bondsman. But, at the end of the day, the way we really are, we're insurance policies for the courts. We're insurance policies for the community to ensure that person getting back into court and taking care of the case that they are being accused of in whatever manner that may be, good, bad, or indifferent. But it really isn't portrayed that way in the movie. He's just the guy wanting to get the bounty back or the bond back. And you're right, Jack kind of screws him over at the end. And it doesn't really go into the next stage of now what is the outcome? Did he have to pay? Does it show the closed doors on his windows with out of business sign? It doesn't say that, but you get that portrayal as the movie goes on that I'm going to be out of business. But it basically to me shows the used car salesman out of the bondsman, and that's not the way Shane, you are portrayed as. It's not the way I am. I see very few bonding companies that are that way. There are a few bonding companies or bondsmen that start out, I think, with that idea in their mind also. But I feel like they come pretty quickly to know that isn't the way they should be portrayed because the light isn't as good. I don't know how else to say it. I don't know how to go that direction, but you are a businessman, and representing your company as a true business is the way it should be done. And I'm not saying that wearing a three-piece suit is the proper way either, but having a good approach, that non-used car salesman approach, is a very good way to do so. I don't know if I'm answering your question or going in a different direction with you, Shane, but sometimes I just talk.
No, that's what we want on these things.
And so, but I found it very interesting that, it stopped when he let the guy go and never went really back to how Eddie ended up.
Right. Or does Eddie file? I mean, you can, get into all the real world details of it. I mean, Mardukas gives Jack $300,000 as not a payoff, but as a gift, a thank you for this. And presumably Eddie's then going to go, or not Eddie, but Jack is going to go open the coffee shop that he was talking about all the time. I would assume that Eddie's going to sue him. You had the guy, you let him go. We had a contract for you to do this, dude, and you screwed me. And so, again, that's all real world stuff, and it's not nearly as dramatic or as fun as a movie like this. But you have to imagine there are consequences.
Oh, yes. And what's really funny is that $300,000 was on his belt or on his person the entire time this movie was going on. When Jack's trying to get $500 wired to him, there was and I realized they were big bills because it was $1,000 bill, if I remember correctly, that he was trying to get a cab to take. But there was still a large amount of funds on this guy's person that I can't believe he didn't pat him down or do something at the very beginning when he took him in. I realized he was at his house when he took him into custody, but it just seemed that he had $300,000 on him, even at his house, that he carried in his belt. That amount of money, what would be assumed to me as a private area that he felt safe at, I would think. So that was very funny to me at the end of the show.
Well, and that was the sort of the pat down that you wonder about. It's like, for your own protection, I mean, the guy says he wants to get away from you. I mean, you make sure he doesn't have, just a little needle or something in his pocket he can stab you with to try and get away. I mean, granted, he's an accountant. He's not going to shoot you, but, that doesn't mean he's not another human being that you're taking back to jail.
My ballpoint pen seems very sharp.
Okay, so my plan here was to talk about the quintessential bail bond movie, which is Jackie Brown and the Max Cherry character, but we've run out of time for today. So I'm hoping that you'd be willing to come back and talk about and use your film critic skills to apply to Jackie Brown and talk to us about how accurate Max Cherry is, because I think Max Cherry is a character that bondsmen really like. And so I'd like to, if you're willing to, hopefully you'll come back and we can talk again another day and talk about Max Cherry and Jackie Brown and how that applies to things these days.
It was really enjoyable, and I would love to come back and give my how many popcorn boxes that Jackie Brown's movie is worth. So it'd be a lot of fun.
Thank you, Dennis, for taking the time to talk to us today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk about bail bonds and popular culture, and hopefully we can do it again real soon.
I agree. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I was really enjoyed being here.
Thank you for joining us today on the Bail in the Midwest podcast.